Welcome to the Claire and Horatio Daily World Brief for Wednesday, July 8, 2026. Look, if you're wondering why a military skirmish halfway across the world actually matters to your daily routine, you really just have to look at the price of gas as of this week.
Because when a massive geopolitical system starts to fracture, it, it rarely announces itself with a formal declaration. Usually it shows up as an invoice, you see a sudden spike in a shipping toll, a quiet jump at the pump, or a shift in the cost of basic consumer goods.
And right now, those economic tremors are being accompanied by actual physical explosions in the Middle East. The interim ceasefire between the United States and Iran has officially collapsed.
It is completely dead. That fragile memorandum of understanding they signed just last month is gone. President Donald Trump used some highly inflammatory language. He referred to the Iranian leadership as scum and declared the agreement null and void. And the physical escalation on the ground, on the water, was immediate and severe.
Iranian forces struck a Saudi oil tanker and a Qatari liquefied natural gas carrier right in the Strait of Hormuz, which is obviously a massive choke point for global energy.
Right, which immediately prompted U.S. Central Command to launch heavy strikes on over 80 targets inside Iran. We were talking about hitting air defense systems, radar installations, and those small, fast-attack boats used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Iran then retaliated by targeting U.S. military sites in Bahrain and Kuwait, actually triggering air raid sirens across the Gulf. But crucially, in the middle of all this kinetic action, the U.S. also revoked the temporary sanctions waiver that had allowed Tehran to restart its oil exports.
Which is really a devastating blow. The underlying strategy here from the U.S. is rooted in economic strangulation. Iran's conventional military has been pretty decimated by repeated U.S. and Israeli strikes over the years, so they are heavily relying on asymmetric warfare.
Using those fast attack boats and coastal missiles to disrupt the world's energy supply without, committing to a full naval battle, they know they can't win.
Exactly, because domestically, Iran is operating under just crushing pressure. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies estimates the country has already sustained roughly $144 billion in economic damage from this ongoing conflict.
And that $144 billion doesn't even account for the lost oil sales from this newly revoked waiver.
It doesn't. Their currency, the rial, has cratered to record lows, and their domestic inflation is currently surging past 88%.
So Iran is now demanding illegal tolls of up to $2 million for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We really have to translate this directly into public impact because the consequences absolutely do not stay confined to that waterway. This military escalation immediately spiked global oil prices by 5%.
When the cost of moving energy through one of the world's most critical checkpoints jumps that quickly, it directly inflates household energy bills and the price of consumer goods for everyone, globally. The cost of living is inextricably tied to the security of that specific stretch of water.
And the violence in the Gulf is happening against a deeply chaotic diplomatic backdrop over in Europe. The NATO summit in Ankara is really showcasing an alliance that is struggling with its own internal cohesion.
President Trump's behavior at the summit featured a pretty extensive litany of grievances. He demanded total alliance compliance with a 3.5% GDP defense spending target, which is, that is far above the current baseline for almost everyone.
He was also airing grievances over Greenland, of all things, and criticizing the UK over airbase access for bombing missions. But then, hours later, he abruptly pivoted during a private meeting to claim there was tremendous love and unity in the room.
It is serious diplomatic whiplash. But amidst that erratic messaging, some massive long-term military commitments were actually finalized. 12 nations, including the UK, announced a $50 billion deep precision strike missile project intended to hit targets up to 12,250 miles away.
Though that system won't even be ready until the 2030s. But there was a much more immediate and frankly baffling proposal at this summit. Trump offered Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a license to locally manufacture American Patriot interceptor missiles to defend against the ongoing Russian ballistic attacks on Kyiv.
Offering the license to build Patriot missiles locally sounds incredibly substantial on paper. But the strategic reality is that Ukraine likely cannot execute this. A single Patriot battery cost roughly $1 billion.
Wait, $1 billion for one battery? And the global production rate is incredibly slow.
Incredibly slow. Only about 600 missiles are produced per year under ideal peacetime conditions in highly secure facilities.
I mean, this sounds like handing someone the blueprints to a bank vault while the bank is actively being robbed.
Hmm.
How can you train realistically set up a cutting-edge, highly sensitive manufacturing base for a billion-dollar weapons system while their territory is under constant ballistic bombardment? Their power grid alone is a daily target.
You simply cannot easily establish a highly sophisticated, secure supply chain on European soil, let alone inside an active war zone. Building these systems requires specialized microchips, complex radar arrays, and highly precise propellants.
And the U.S. is presumably reluctant to part with its own stockpile, considering they've used more than half of their inventory during this escalating conflict with Iran.
That is the core issue. Offering the manufacturing license acts as a political deflection. It allows the administration to appear very proactive in supporting Ukraine's defense without having to actually draw down the limited existing U.S. arsenal. It passes the burden of production onto a nation that lacks the physical infrastructure to produce them.
And the foreign policies negotiated at NATO are entirely dependent on the domestic political machinery that puts those leaders in power to begin with. We are shifting from international alliances to some serious threats to democratic integrity in both the UK and the US. Let's look at the British funding probe.
The UK's National Crime Agency is currently investigating suspicious activity reports concerning the funding of the Reform UK Party. And the finances under scrutiny here form a very complex, opaque web.
The Guardian reported that a £1 million donation, which is roughly 1.34 million US dollars, was routed to a reform fundraising vehicle by Fiona Cottrell, who is the mother of convicted fraudster George Cottrell.
What makes this investigation significant is the method of transfer. This money was moved through a UK bank account belonging to an Australian cryptocurrency exchange platform called OneFi.
Which means British bankers were unable to trace the ultimate source of these funds, prompting them to file a suspicious activity report, or SAR, to law enforcement. We focus endlessly on foreign interference in our elections, but these UK banking flags show how easily domestic political financing can obscure the true origins of massive capital. Are our electoral watchdogs fundamentally outmatched by modern digitized money movement?
They are definitively struggling to keep pace with the speed and anonymity of modern political finance. Now, a suspicious activity report is not proof of a crime. It is an intelligence tool. Banks file a SAR when they suspect money laundering or simply cannot verify the origin of funds to meet their compliance standards.
But when millions of dollars flow into a major political party through borderless cryptocurrency exchanges, it creates a massive civic blind spot. Democracies are acutely vulnerable when voters cannot clearly see who is financing the individuals seeking to govern them.
The UK's Electoral Commission rules rely heavily on transparency and traditional banking trails. Digitized money deliberately exploits that requirement by breaking the chain of custody. And the investigation in the UK goes further than just this one donation.
There is also a highly irregular loan of £78,100, over 100,000 US dollars, made to Reform's deputy leader, Richard Tice, tied to a Dubai property purchase. Plus, Nigel Farage received a $6.7 million cryptocurrency gift from a billionaire donor just before the election.
Moving across the Atlantic to the United States, the balance of power in the Senate is currently threatened by severe scandal in Maine. Democratic candidate Graham Plattner is facing intense pressure from top party leaders to drop out of the race following credible sexual assault allegations from multiple women.
The institutional pressure on Plattner is immense because the stakes of this specific seat are pivotal for control of the entire Senate. Figures like Senator Bernie Sanders and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are demanding he step aside immediately.
And the timeline here is the critical mechanism. Plattner must withdraw by July 13 for the party to legally place a replacement candidate on the ballot against incumbent Republican Susan Collins.
The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee has explicitly stated they will pull all financial investment from the main race if Plattner remains on the ballot. This situation follows a cascade of earlier controversies in his campaign, including the discovery of a tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol, dismissive online comments about sexual assault victims, and admissions of marital infidelity.
So whether it is obscured cryptocurrency donations moving through Australian exchanges or a candidate attempting to weather disqualifying misconduct allegations at a pivotal Senate race, we're watching the basic integrity of the ballot being severely tested. Democracies are vulnerable when the mechanisms of accountability fail to keep pace with the speed of modern politics.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit claranaratio.com. While the US and UK grapple with these institutional vulnerabilities, a striking and sudden reversal of democratic backsliding is unfolding in Central Europe, showing what happens when civic accountability is actually restored.
In Hungary, the state-run news channel M1 unexpectedly broadcast a black screen accompanied by a stark written apology. The text read, "Public media should not lie. We are sorry for doing it for so long."
That broadcast marks the definitive end of Viktor Orban's 16-year grip on the media, spearheaded by the new Prime Minister, Peter Magyar. Imagine turning on the state channel you've known for over a decade, expecting the usual vitriol, and just seeing an apology for lying. How does a society begin to establish a baseline of truth and shared reality after 16 straight years of manufactured reality?
Rebuilding that shared reality starts with dismantling the mechanism of control. Over his tenure, Orban's government systematically consolidated hundreds of private print, broadcast, and online media outlets into a single pro-government foundation known as KESMA.
And they achieved this capture not through military force, but through economic starvation and legal loopholes, correct? They withheld state advertising revenue from independent outlets to force them into financial distress.
That was the playbook. Oligarchs aligned with the ruling party would then buy up these distressed outlets and donate them to the KESMA Foundation. Independent journalists were purged, and the public channels were transformed into a propaganda apparatus that relentlessly targeted immigrants, civil society organizations, and the European Union, while often reproducing unfiltered Russian state narratives.
But the new leadership under Prime Minister Magyar immediately fired the aggressive propaganda directors who oversaw this output. And the symbolic weight of this change was broadcast very clearly to the public. When the M1 channel relaunched, it did so at exactly 19.56 Central European Time.
Which is a direct nod to the 1956 anti-Soviet revolution in Hungary. Instead of the usual state messaging, they broadcast a classic Hungarian political satire mocking the horrors of Stalinist propaganda.
But removing the directors and broadcasting an apology, however symbolic, is just a vital first step. Rebuilding public trust from the ground up requires transparent, structural guarantees, not just a change in management.
The new government plans to staff the supervisory board of the restructured media holding company with representatives from the ruling majority, the parliamentary opposition, and independent journalists associations. They are attempting to legally hardwire balance back into a system that was explicitly engineered to eliminate it.
Reestablishing a shared reality is incredibly difficult in the political sphere, but it is completely unavoidable when looking at our physical environment. The human cost of extreme weather is forcing concrete, immediate action across the globe. Let us examine the catastrophic flooding unfolding in China.
Typhoon Maysak has triggered devastating floods in the southern province of Guangxi, alongside rare destructive tornadoes in the central province of Hubei. The official death toll is at least 21, with tens of thousands evacuated.
The sheer speed of the disaster has been overwhelming. Floodwater submerged the first floors of homes in Guangxi by dawn, leaving thousands stranded on rooftops without food, communication, or electricity. Rescue operations are severely hampered by the continuing extreme weather.
The imagery emerging from this crisis is terrifying. We are seeing footage of tornadoes tossing outdoor dining furniture and shattering windows in high-rise apartments, in one instance, reportedly sucking a man out of a 12th-story window.
Residents in flooded areas are even dealing with snakes escaping from local breeding farms into the murky water. And the trillion-dollar agricultural sector in these provinces is taking a massive hit, which will undoubtedly ripple out to global food supply chains.
Meanwhile, the physical realities of climate change are transitioning rapidly from an abstract environmental talking point to a fundamental labor and safety crisis. That transition is accelerating heavily in Europe right now. Intensifying heat waves have pushed labor unions to demand mandatory thermal limits for workers.
With 130 million workers exposed to heat stress across Europe, they are pushing for a legal cap of 30 to 32.5 degrees Celsius on the wet bulb globe temperature scale. We're seeing climate change become a fundamental labor rights issue. If an office building flooded, you wouldn't expect the staff to just keep typing at their desks. Why do we continually expect outdoor and industrial workers to push through lethal heat?
We expect it because our current legal and infrastructure frameworks are entirely inadequate for the rapidly shifting climate baseline. The wet bulb measurement is critical to understand here. It factors in humidity alongside air temperature, which measures the human body's actual ability to cool itself through sweating.
Evaporation requires relatively dry air. If the air is fully saturated with humidity, sweat simply cannot evaporate.
And when that wet bulb limit is breached, the human body literally cannot shed heat. Internal temperatures rise, organs begin to fail, and physical labor becomes lethal. The unions are fighting to include these thermal limits in a forthcoming quality jobs law, giving workers the explicit legal right to stop working when conditions become deadly.
It is a direct response to the systemic vulnerability of a workforce being pushed past the biological limits of human endurance. The developments we have covered today reveal distinct pressures moving in different directions across the globe. We are seeing the fragility of geopolitical ceasefires in the Middle East disrupt global energy markets.
We are watching the urgent fight for transparent elections in the US and UK, alongside the dismantling of state propaganda networks in Hungary, test the resilience of democracies. And we are confronting the undeniable physical realities of a warming planet that is actively altering how and where human beings can safely live and work.
Consider the intersection of the massive artificial intelligence boom and those very climate realities we just discussed. We are rushing to automate industries and build massive data centers globally. Just look at the Australian dock workers who are currently fighting for a 28-hour work week to protect their livelihoods from port operator DP World's aggressive push for AI and automation.
Yet that exact AI technology requires immense amounts of energy and water to operate and cool the data centers. We are dramatically increasing our demand for the exact natural resources that are being crippled by the climate extremes, causing lethal heat and devastating floods today.
The technological push is actively colliding with the environmental ceiling, demanding power and water from systems that are already buckling under the physical changes to our atmosphere. The Claire Horatio Daily World Brief is designed to help you navigate these incredible complexities. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit claireandhoratio.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay awake.